Customers, they love it when you talk about how you know about them.
Yeah.
That brings that confidence. And I think that we need to go back to that. And I think that that's the easiest way into the sell, right? That's the easiest way to retain that customer. You start looking at your appraisal tools and you start looking at those things. You should be looking at your service lane, because the best auction that's happening in right now is your service lane. Do the work beforehand, right? You know that customer's coming in for service tomorrow. Do the work beforehand. Does that customer look like they have buying signals? Have they been on your dealership's website? Have they been looking in those specific things?
Welcome to Retention Roadmap, navigating service success for new car dealerships. I'm your host, Bill Springer. Today's podcast is sponsored by DriveSure. DriveSure helps new car dealerships remain the go-to provider for maintenance, tires, and repairs. For information on how DriveSure can help your dealership, go to drivesure.com/dealership solutions. My guest today is Skyler Chadwick, Director of Product Consulting at Cox Automotive. Skyler has spent the last 14 years with Cox Automotive, beginning his career at DealerTrack and working his way into his current role supporting both X-Time and V-Auto. In that role, he brings together deep industry knowledge and technical expertise to help dealers make smarter decisions around service retention and inventory management. Skyler has a strong passion for the automotive industry and a reputation for translating complex data into practical real-world insights for dealers. Today, we're going to focus on findings from Cox Automotive's recently released service industry study, including what the data tells us about declining service retention, shifting customer behavior, and what dealership leaders should be paying attention to as they plan for 2026 and beyond. Skyler, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you as well. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Retention is just a huge thing.
Yeah, sure.
The two C's that I feel like are the two C's that dealerships need to really focus on this first 2 quarters of the year, because we're not doing a great job at it. We think that I think dealerships are checking a box. They think they're checking a box, but just by checking that box doesn't mean that we're really doing what we should be doing, right?
Yeah.
I think about clarity. I was told somebody the other day, it's like my truck needed an oil change, and I had 4 dealerships to choose from, and I tested them all. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's amazing to me how 1 out of the 4, could really tell me what it was going to cost to get that work done. So I think there's some clarity and there's some confidence. We got to start instilling the confidence back in our consumers. And I think that's where dealerships think they're doing a great job, but in reality is I don't think they realize what the consumers are truly saying.
So let's just jump right into it. For listeners who haven't seen the study yet, what's the core message from the Cox Automotive service industry study?
That if I was a dealership, one of the things that I would start to think about is that piece of that pie, the services that really kind of keep the lights in the dealership running in a dealership, really is that piece of the pie is being taken away from our general repairs. General repairs continue to grow, and that piece of that pie that dealerships are so used to having, and when it comes to customers and returning customers back to the dealership, that piece of the pie is finally surpassed what we talk about service retention with customers and keeping those customers in our ecosystem at the dealership. And so it's really urgent for dealerships to start making a change and thinking about goals for next year, how we can really start to bring that clarity and trust back to our customer base who buy vehicles, and also servicing that vehicle and keeping them in our ecosystem, because we want them returning back to the dealership to buy the next vehicle from us. So that piece of the pie is shrunk tremendously for sure. So
yeah, the study says that dealerships have lost 12% of service visits to competition since 2018. What do you see as the biggest drivers behind this shift?
I think competition and pricing, right? I think there's this narrative out there that dealerships cost more money than independent general repair shops. And I think there's also time. I think we've got into this new age where I want it now.
Yeah.
I can get that service now. And I think that dealerships are facing that. When you think about going to a dealership, you may not be able to get in for at least a week or 2 weeks. And that's not sufficing to customers who are used to going to Amazon and getting it that day. I think what now we are starting to think about is how do we bring that service to that customer next day, with mobile servicing. I think a lot of dealerships and OEMs are getting behind that too as well. But I really truly do think that our customer base patience is kind of a little bit there. Is kind of dwindling a little bit, and I think they're looking as like, hey, I need to get my oil change. I gotta get it done now.
Hmm.
It's not about waiting 2 weeks or 1 week like it used to be. It's now I need that next day for sure. So I think our customer focus point is changing for sure.
Yep. I'm curious also if your study uncovered where dealerships are kind of losing the most ground. Is it, routine maintenance? Is it the bigger repairs? Is it tires? Or is it something else? Any surprises uncovered there?
You asked the right question, and I think the biggest thing that we're starting to see is that general repair. It's the oil changes, it's the tires, it's the quick lane kind of things that we see our customers needing today. I think that is where we start to see our customers fall off base, and so it's really important for us as dealerships to think about where can we help kind of grow those specific things. I think like general repair, that piece of that pie is up 2%, right? It was at 25%, now it's at 27%, from in 2025.
As
Uh,
market share?
as market share,
Yeah.
yeah. And so
Okay.
we're starting to see some of those things that start where we start to see those things. So really that general repair is where we're starting to see those customers and that piece of that pie go. But you think about that, those are the general maintenance things that we used to see our customers on a daily basis too as well. And I also think the other thing too is I think we're starting to see where service intervals have increased, right? We used to
Sure.
see that car every 5,000, now it's 10,000. And now we're starting to really start to see that in our numbers and so forth. So it's really important for dealerships to make sure that they really focus on that customer experience when that customer comes in, because you may only see that customer for a year,
Hmm.
because they may only drive that vehicle for 10 to 12,000 miles a year. So service intervals are starting to have a play in those specific things, but I really do think it's really around urgency of the consumer getting those quick lane, those operable things that get them going on the road again. Like it's your brakes,
Yeah.
your tires, right? It's your general repair, your maintenance, little quick maintenance items that really make an effect.
Yep. What when you saw the results of the study, Skylar, what stood out to you, or what surprised you the most when you saw the results?
What really shocked me is when that customer's falling off, that dealership's ecosystem.
Yeah.
We're used to seeing those customers like that. You buy a new car from a dealership, that car's under warranty for the first 5 years in most cases. And so, what really concerned me is that now I'm starting to see that fall off after year two. And that's where we start to see that major jump. And so, to me, those are the biggest things. Because if you look at it in 2028 and 2018, I believe the number was 58% of customer base by retention. Now that's at 45% at year 2 to 5. And
Hmm.
so that's a pretty big jump there. When we start to see customers that fall off, that's kind of concerning to me, that we're really not focusing on marketing to those customers, getting them back to the dealership. And that goes back to what I talked about earlier, is about confidence, building confidence back in your customers, and then building that trust that a customer can really make sure that they're confident bringing their vehicle to you.
Yeah.
Those are some big things too as well.
Yeah, when I saw that statistic as well, when you talked about, the big drop off in the 0 to 5 model year, that just caused the alarm bells to go off in my mind as well. Because, when you combine that with the decline in sales during COVID, when there just weren't as many vehicles available, that's really a double whammy that's hitting dealers now, because those vehicles age out, and that's typically when you see that drop off in retention. So not only is, according to your study, the drop off in retention occurring sooner, but there's just less customers as well.
Yeah. And, the average age of vehicle also has grown over the last year, right? We saw it go from 12.6 to 12.8. That was one of the single big jump that we've seen. And so these customers have older vehicles and so forth. And so we are starting to see those customers go to those general repairs and those types of things. But what really stand out to me is what's really scary to me is that drop off right at that 2 to 5 year mark, where we saw a major decline from 2018 to 2025. We really got to focus on that for sure.
Yeah. And those cars, even though we see a drop off there, our statistics or our metrics show us that that really is the sweet spot for where dealers get the most parts and service revenue. If you looked
Yeah.
at the model years that provide the highest proportion of revenue for the service department, it really is those vehicles in years 5 and 6 that really provide a lot of revenue to the dealership, which makes sense because those are vehicles that are coming out of warranty. They need tires, they need other repairs done, and everything that we can do to make sure that we keep those customers coming back is going to help dealers be more successful. So, yeah, um, definitely something to keep an eye on. I'm glad you mentioned Skyler earlier about the increased service intervals and the impact that that's having on dealers. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about Cox Auto Weekly Snapshot that includes both the service repair order volume index as well as the vehicle order revenue index. I'm curious in terms of if you can see, particularly maybe by brand, if you can see what's happening with respect to those increased service intervals, what impact that's having on. Clearly, we know the impact that it has on dealership frequency of visit, but did they make it up in the dollar amount when the customer does come in? Do you have any insights on that?
It's interesting. Like you started to see that gap, separate a little bit between the number of repair orders and the dollars. We see dollars start to continue to climb up
Yeah,
as far as that, and I think that's going to the cost of just parts and labor. Parts and labor is just shot through the roof, to be honest. And I think every dealership knows that. And that's why dealerships are having great months because the dollars over labor and parts pricing has gone up dramatically. And so that's where we're seeing it. I don't have the direct numbers on by specific OEM, but I would say that we're starting to see some of those numbers where we're starting to see that gap really start to separate due to a lot of things. And that's just one thing I can possibly think off right off the top of my head is that our service intervals are going longer. And
right.
so you're not seeing the customer long as much. And you see the piece of the pie where that customer that has that vehicle that's average age 12.8 12.8, well, they're going to go to a general repair, right? The car's not under warranty, but can we do those specific things? And what's interesting to me is like 33% of our customers in the study said that they would actually consider now trading in that vehicle for a newer vehicle. So we're starting
Yeah,
to see a difference in change in that. And so I'm interested to see how those numbers play out this next year because I'm thinking as we anticipate interest rates to come down just a little bit more, right, on vehicles, loans, and so forth, and these customers that have older vehicles are looking to trade those vehicles in because I think the average dollar that we're starting to see those customers make that, hey, I'm going to start thinking about buying that new car. It's well $3,000. Well, a car that's 12.8 years on the road, well, those are due for major services. Well, what does major services cost?
sure.
Those are the more highest costs. And so we're starting to see a lot of things play into that factor where dealerships are fighting for against that general repair, but we're also fighting against service intervals too, and also parts and labor costs. And that's why dealerships have seen great months and they continue to see great months as far as like revenue and those things because parts and labor have been able to increase over the last couple of years. And now, right, service intervals are a little bit longer. So those are the things I'm looking at is like, okay, where is that sweet spot for dealerships to really start looking at those customer base, those service customers, get them back into the dealership, offer them an actual value on their vehicle because 33% of them are actually interested in getting a valuation on their vehicle, what it's actually worth.
Yeah,
Doesn't make sense for me to buy a new car now. So
right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm glad you brought that up, Skylar, because we talk a lot about the sales to service handoff, getting that customer in when they, getting that customer introduced to the service department when they buy a new or used vehicle. But it seems like we don't talk as much about as we should about the service to sales handoff in terms of what can we do to help help a customer make the right decision about whether or not it's time to trade in that vehicle. And of course, that's a great opportunity for the used car department as well to source more and more of their vehicles as well. So, please talk to me a little bit more about what you're seeing there in the marketplace and how dealers can really take more advantage of talking to their service customers about trading in their vehicles and sourcing some of their used vehicles from the service drive.
Yeah, one of the things I always talk to dealerships about is like when we talk about first party data, right? And that's one of the things that I talk about so much about because that is what's important. If you know everything about your customer, right? And I talk about connected solutions, right? When I talk about software, we install software, but are we using it effectively? And that's the biggest thing. And so if I can understand a customer like you, Bill, coming into the dealership, if I know that you've been looking on Auto Trader or some of our other platforms for a new vehicle, and you see that customer coming in for service, you probably should pay more attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be looking at, hey, is this customer in a good equity position? Right? All these things, we need to be start doing those things and say, hey, guess what? It might be great for us to do that 3,000 jobs when we take it in and do reconditioning, right? And pay that service advisor for those things so that the combination doesn't lose that. But we really need to do a little bit more work on the front end and helping the back end too as well, right? Retaining customer on the back end, but also retaining the customer to sell on the front end too as well. And so when I started thinking about that, you start looking at your appraisal tools and you start looking at those things, you should be looking at your service lane
Yeah.
because the best auction that is happening in right now is your service lane. That is the best actual auction that you should be looking at right now because and I think a lot of dealerships don't do a great job, right? We used to see the desk and I always go into the dealership and you used to pay that person, they would sit in the desk and they would go bug the people that their service customers, hey, you looking to trade in your car? No, do the work beforehand, right? You know that customer's coming in for service tomorrow. Do the work beforehand. Does that customer look like they have buying signals? Have they been on your dealership's website? Have they been looking in those specific things? And those are the types of things I look for. And then looking at equity, right? It's all about making sure that your actual tools are talking to each other to make that more proficient too as well. Because customers, they love it when they know when you talk about how you know about them.
Yeah.
That brings that confidence. And I think that we need to go back to that. And I think that that's the easiest way into the sell, right? That's the easiest way to retain that customer. I think about people that lease cars, right? During COVID, those are the best people to go back and look at, right? And try to retain those. We looked at that, right? Off lease, those cars were coming off lease. Well, how do we retain that customer? It's the same thing. So that service to sales conversation is actually my biggest conversation in 2026. And what we're going to do here at Cox Automotive, we're going to connect those solutions and making it easier for dealerships to be able to protect their gross profit ability, but also making sure that they can concisely work with that customer to make sure that they build confidence in saying, hey, yeah, I want to buy this car, right? Because the best business, I always tell people, we're in the business of repeat referral business. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And if service and sales can figure that out, guess what? Home run
Yep.
for this next year.
Yep.
So
I'm curious as to your opinion, Skylar, on a metric that we started measuring recently for our dealership clients, and that is the percentage of new car sales. And we're doing it for used too, but I want to focus on the percentage of new car sales that are sold to active service customers. So customers who have been into the dealership within the last 12 months for service. What percentage of your new car sales do those customers make up? And we're seeing the numbers bounce around a little bit, but on average, it's around 20 to 25% of
yeah.
new vehicles sold are to active service customers. I'm not, it's not clear to me whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just curious as to what you think of a metric like that in terms of whether or not it is beneficial, for the dealership to track something like that.
I think it's super beneficial, and I think that you should be tracking that in your reports. I look into a dealership. They last month maybe they took 10 cars in, on trade from the service lane, and we have reports that can show that to dealerships. What's most important to me is that what's right now is that dealerships want to grow that number. They really do. Because guess why? They go to the auctions and they don't have to pay those auction fees, right? And that's why I keep on going back to that. Your service lane is the best and most important auction that's happening on. And I think a lot of dealerships are just barely starting to catch on to that. And when I said 12.8 years, that is your ticket. Those customers are ready to start looking into upgrading. We're starting to see those interest rates. So I don't know what a good number is. You'd have to look at your dealerships, and I would just say if you're growing that by 2 cars a month, maybe 3 cars a month, perfect,
Yeah.
right? Then we're on a trajectory of growing that business of where our customers are. And so that to me, that's what I'm looking at is like, how do we continue to help dealerships grow that service
Yep.
equity mining for new customers, new car sales? It's a huge part of the business and so forth. And I actually think that that is when I talk to dealerships, that's what they're excited about 2026 is like, how do we actually bridge this gap? How do we make this better? But you're not going to do it without confidence in your customers. And that goes back to making sure you know who they are, right? You, as a service advisor, when you walk out with your tablet on the service drive and you're checking them in, they want to know, hey, Mr. Springer, how are you doing today? Right? Make that customer feel important. And it's the same way on everything. We know who you are. We know the history on your vehicle. We know what you've been looking at, right? But you can't do that if your technology is not talking to each other. And I
Yeah.
think that that is the biggest part. When I talk to dealerships, your technology's got to talk. And it's really important to talk about that first party data because that's your data on your customer base and how
Sure.
you can go to market for sure. So.
Yep. For sure. So as we wrap up our time together here, Skyler, I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about what dealers should be focused on for 2026. So, based on the study, what do you see as kind of the top two or three actions that you'd recommend for dealerships, for dealership leaders heading into 2026 as they put the polish on their final plans?
If I was to say a couple things, clarity. If I'm in the service lane today, we've got to fix our actual appointments. We're seeing too many customers fall off. They go to the dealership, they find their vehicle, and they can't find what they're looking for. That could be price, it could be service. So how do we actually bring actual, I want clarity, you would say to the consumer there, making sure because if I can't get that customer to schedule an appointment, there's no value to that for me. And so what I think dealerships, what I'm seeing is that we've got to fix the pricing on the website, right? We want to make sure that our customers are confident that when they go to schedule those simple maintenance things that's the cost you're going to charge them. Because one of the things we found in the surveys that customers said, one of the things that they did not like is that the price was different than what they were quoted. And so that is a huge part of it. The other thing is I think that when I think about service, I also think that that is your banking. That's your bank, right? That's your gross profitability in a dealership. That's what's keeping the lights going on and so forth. And so when I think about those things, don't shut off your banking system, right? I see too many dealerships, their last appointment is being taken at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because they're worried about getting everything cleared out for the next day, right? And I also think that dealerships should also take a little bit of a different approach too. Maybe instead of offering those coveted times in the morning, maybe you incentivize customers to take the afternoons. And I think that is something we could probably look at too as well as how do we market and change the retrospect of our customers and the way that they look at those specific things. So that's me on my service side. The actual front end of the business, how do we acquire more customer vehicles and get them into new cars from the actual front end of the business and the back of the business? That's my biggest thing is that service to sales conversation because here, I think in 2024, we're roughly about 47% of our customers said they were willing to trade in their car when in 2022, that was just at 30%. So you're looking at almost a 17% jump in customers thinking it's almost time to trade that car in.
Yeah.
And this is the best part. You should be looking at your service lane as the next way to actually acquire those vehicles and then get them back into the road to reconditioning and things like that, get them back on the road as well. So that's my focal point for this year is
Yep.
really focus on service to sales. But service, you got a bigger picture in this of confidence and making sure that customer stays in our ecosystem so that sales has an opportunity to sell them a new car. Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's very much interestingly in alignment with one of the presentations I'll be giving at NADA this coming February on service retention, and within that presentation, talking about some of the key opportunities that are available to dealers for that service to sales handoff and the benefits that accrue to all the parties involved in that. So, yeah, very much in alignment with interestingly with that presentation with my presentation coming up. So great to hear. Skyler, thanks so much for being with us today. If any of our listeners would like to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, go ahead and email me at skyler.chadwick@coxautoinc.com, and I would be gladly to answer any questions, share the results of this study with you, and look at your operations and how we can help you for sure. So,
Super. That's great. Skyler, thanks very much for being with us today. Really appreciate your time. Gave us a lot to think about, and look forward to hearing from you again soon.
yep, looking forward to 2026. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thank you. You've been listening to Retention Roadmap, Navigating Service Success for New Car Dealerships. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.